Hello, and welcome to the Friday Night Author Roundtable. I'm your host, Chris Baker, and during the next half hour, we'll be speaking with several very talented authors about their newly released books, what their inspiration was for creating their unique stories, and why it would be a great book to read and share with your friends and family. You turn on the news or go on social media and everything seems doom and gloom, but is it really that bad? Well, I think that's the topic of this next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable. The book is called The Negative Society by author Marshall Lamb from Fulton Books. Marshall, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now tell everybody a little bit about your book.
Well, it's a social commentary that disputes the contention by the media and our elected officials that the country and the world are in bad shape. So I took 11 topics that are typically used as illustrations at this point and took an in-depth look at the real data.
Now, what kind of inspired this book? Where did that all kind of begin?
I started noticing a number of years ago that the media was portraying everything as being horrible and how life wasn't as good now as it was in the 50s and 60s. Well, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I remembered clearly that times were not as good then as they are now. So that kind of inspired me to start taking a look around at data points to prove the point. And I think one of the key ones that I even put in my book was they always referenced that wives had to work outside the home. Well, it's been proven that wives don't have to work outside the home. No, they want to. They don't want to just sit home and be homemakers anymore. Women today have much more ambition than that. So those are the kind of things that I noticed, and so I started collecting data.
I have to imagine this is the kind of book that really anybody would find a lot of interest in. But is there a particular person or a particular type of person that you would really like to see get this book and read it?
Well, my target reader really is anyone who is concerned with this constant bombardment of doom and gloom from our media and elected officials. I think my readers will appreciate the fact that I don't tell them what to think. I challenge them to research facts and draw their own conclusions. I also make it clear that I will respect their opinion regardless of any personal beliefs. And I expect that most of my readers will agree with me on some subjects and disagree on others, because it has neither liberal nor conservative leanings. It depends on the subject.
Now, how was it working with Fulton Books to get this published and to be able to get this out there?
They were absolutely fantastic. I can't say enough about the folks at Fulton Books, Megan in particular, but I just thought they were terrific.
Now, have you thought about maybe a follow-up to this, or are you working on anything new?
Yeah, I've started an outline because some friends of mine, based on my years of experience in operations, asked me to consider the workplace. So I am kind of drafting an outline on a follow-up book that says The Negative Workplace.
Oh, excellent. I think that's a great idea, and look forward to that. Now, this book, The Negative Society, when people read this, what do you hope is the most important message that comes across when it's all said and done?
To be confident in your own ability to analyze data, look at facts, and draw your own conclusions, and not to be led, if you will, by media and elected officials who want you to just believe all of their little sound bites, particularly since, as I point out in the book, many of their sound bites are either outright lies or have an element of untruth in them.
Well, this is a book I'm excited about because I'm a firm believer in, thinking for oneself and looking at things, from a different perspective than what you're being told. And this, to me, is a fantastic book, and I encourage everyone to pick it up. The book is called The Negative Society by author Marshall Lamb from Fulton Books. You can get your copy today, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Google Play, just a few of the online sources, as well as at the brick and mortar stores. And Marshall, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time.
This next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable, a wonderful book for kids, and I think even adults reading it too, and with kids will gain a lot. All about the fact that, all things are possible with God, and that's at the heart of this book. The book is called Teeny Weeny Teddy by author Carly Salazar from Christian Faith Publishing. Carly, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me out.
Now tell everybody a little bit about your story.
Well, my story is about faith. I would like people to have faith without limits, reservations, or restrictions. I believe that God is not limited and that He can do everything that He says He can do. And the Bible tells us we have not because we ask not. If we don't believe believe that he can or will, that's on us, not on him. I think that everything that we want from God, we should ask and let him make the decision if it's right for us or not, because he has our best interest at heart. I think that kids are like this. I think that kids don't question what people say. They just have the faith that whatever you tell them, they believe it. So I believe that if we can believe like that, if we can believe in God like that, and we don't limit him, that the possibilities for faith to benefit our lives is limitless.
What kind of inspired this story? Where did that begin?
I believe that it begins with the Holy Spirit. I think he puts it in me to write. I've written hundreds and hundreds of tracts and books and poems and songs. I'm also a singer-songwriter. And I believe that it comes from God's heart to our hearts. And if we act on that, then I believe that truly we're inspired by something greater than ourselves. And in doing so, if we act on that, then it's possible that we can affect or influence or benefit so many others around us in this world and lives we don't even know.
Now, how was it for you working with Christian Faith Publishing to see this book published and to be able to, have the finished product in your hand to be able to share this?
Well, it's quite exciting, to say the least. It takes a lot of work on both behalf, on the publisher and on the writers, to get these things out there. But I'll tell you what, there's no greater feeling than when you have it in your hands and you know that it can be out there inspiring and in the hands of others where it might actually do the good that you're hoping that it's going to do.
Anything in the works, maybe a sequel to this?
Yes, I actually have 2 other books that'll follow this, Teeny Weeny Teddy 2, and the last one. There's 3 in this little series of books that will come out, and Teeny Weeny Teddy 3. I don't know if I should give you any insight on those or just let it be a surprise, but Teddy does have a couple more adventures to the final conclusion where hopefully everybody understands that there's nothing greater than our faith in God, and that even though sometimes people might think that what we are asking God for is silly, God doesn't think we're silly. He says, just ask me, and I'll do it for you. And it may seem silly to some to think that God would bring a teeny-weeny bear to life for a child because she asked. But I do believe that if God can create a universe, that bringing a little bear to life for a child, even though it may not seem possible for us, is not impossible for God.
Well, I tell you what, that is an amazing message. And of course, looking forward to more adventures with Teeny Weeny Teddy down the road. And if you could say there was one overall most important message, what do you hope that would be?
All things are possible with God. There's nothing he can't or won't do that benefits us. He has nothing but the greatest heart for us. He wants all things for us. And I do believe that if we could understand that and not be afraid or limit him, that the possibilities that he could do to change our lives or make our lives better in this time and place are limitless.
Kids are going to enjoy this. It's going to be a fun read, but I think families, as you said, are really going to enjoy reading this together. The book is called Teeny Weeny Teddy by author Carly Salazar from Christian Faith Publishing. I encourage everyone, pick up your copy today. Of course, with the holidays here, be a perfect gift. You can do that at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, just a few of the online sources, as well as at the brick and mortar stores. And Carly, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me on, Chris. It's been a wonderful experience.
Our next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable, an eye-opening look at the cross and what Jesus actually went through on the cross. The book is called The Truth About Jesus and the Story of the Cross by Cynthia and Hema Ebuyo from Christian Faith Publishing. And on the phone, we have Hema. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about your book.
This book gives a clear understanding of the cross and what happened to Lord Jesus Christ on the cross. There are some misconceptions about what he went through or misunderstandings about the depth of the suffering, but this book helps to kind of clear that up, and based on the revelations that the Lord gives through the scriptures, so we have a better understanding of the depth of the suffering of Christ on the cross.
Now, what inspired you and Cynthia to write this book? Where did that all kind of begin?
The inspiration for this book really came from the Holy Spirit, came from other revelations that he gave us, and then, he basically prompted us to kind of put it down in writing because, it is very important, according to the Lord, that, other people also learn the depth of these sufferings, that, yes, we know about the stripes, we know about the beatings, the nails, but, there was some other things that, it's not so obvious, so people clearly, in the Bible.
Now, if you're looking at a target audience, who do you think is the reader that will gain the most from this, or is this really kind of a book that I think a lot of people will learn from?
Yes, a lot of people will learn from this book. Christians and even non-Christians, those who don't understand much about Christ, but also for Christians who want to know more about what actually the Lord went through on the cross. One thing the Lord revealed to us was that the most important, that even Christ was kind of concerned that when he goes to the grave that he will not be resurrected. That was one primary concern that he had. So that's one thing that is in this book. That one of the revelations that we received. So even Christians who benefit from this book, and even non-Christians, who are maybe trying to know more about Christ, know more about Christianity, this book will also be helpful to them to understand more.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to get this book published and to be able to share this important message?
Oh, it was easy and nice working with them. I enjoyed the relationship we had with them, working with them, back and forth, Of course, there's a distance in where we live, but back and forth through emails. It was nice working with Brian and the rest of the team at Christian Faith Publishing. I'm just grateful to God that we met them and we used them.
Now, is this something you're going to do again? Maybe a follow-up to this book, or are you working on anything new?
Yes, we'll have some other books that working on, but kind of put a break for the meantime. But yes, I will work again with the Christian Faith Publishing. There are some other books in the pipeline.
Now, when people read this book, The Truth About Jesus and the Story of the Cross, what do you hope is the most important message that they get from reading this?
I will hope that they will come to understand more the depth of the suffering that Christ went through, the sacrifice that he made on the cross. It wasn't just that he got beaten. From where he was, his glory that he left in heaven to come down and die for us and take the risk of going to the grave to get the keys of hell. He died for all of us. So I hope that when people read this book, they will understand more what it really meant and how far he had to go to give us salvation.
Well, this is such a great book because, I don't think a lot of people understand just how far Christ went to pay for our sins and for our salvation. I think this is going to be, like I said earlier, an eye-opening book. The book is called The Truth About Jesus and the Story of the Cross by authors Cynthia and Nehima Ebuyo from Christian Faith Publishing. Get your copy today, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, as well as at the brick-and-mortar stores. And Nehima, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Chris.
Of course, I'm a huge fan of the sci-fi and fantasy genres, and what I love is when you can take that genre and add faith into it, and I think that's what we have with this next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable. The book is called The Twins of Demeter, Science Fiction with a Faith Perspective by author Joseph Konchelik from Christian Faith Publishing. Joseph, thank you for being on the show.
Yes, thank you for asking me.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about this book.
Well, The Twins of Demeter really has two parallel themes. First, it's a science fiction, of course, as you mentioned, and it's set 200 years from now. And I'm using the problems of climate change as a spur to the activities of this book, where they launch spaceships with 3,000 human embryos to go to another world to save humanity. This idea is being floated by a number of scientists at this time, and you can either buy it or not. The other aspect of it is, if you accept the premise, then the next aspect of this is whether or not a community can be formed. And I believe that the basis of community has to be in faith. That essentially it's the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I've broken that out into three parts. What I say is empathy, the feelings that you have for others, acting upon that in compassion, and then sacrifice, what you're willing to give up to do for others. These are the things that will bind a community together. And so this group of people who finally do successfully land on another planet are able to put a community together following those themes.
Now, what inspired this book and this story? Where did that all kind of come from?
I really wanted to write a book that had a positive faith experience. I'm a big fan of science fiction, as you are, and I wanted to see a different kind of science fiction developed. I didn't want to go the route of the little green men who are here to suck your brains out your ear. I wanted to have a book that was a positive experience and also reflected upon the whole problem of climate change, which I believe is a lack of stewardship of God's gift to us.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to get this book published and to be able to get this book out there?
They've been great. Their editing staff did an excellent job. If ever I had a question, they were very quick to respond. I've had a very good working relationship with them, and I think the product that they developed in the end, I've had experiences with other publishers. The product that they developed is excellent.
Now, are you working on anything new or maybe a sequel to this down the road? What do you got going on in the works?
You've hit the nail on the head. I'm working on the first sequel to the book, a book I call Terra Nova. In the story of the twins of Demeter, a person feels a calling to return to Earth and doesn't exactly know why, but nevertheless is following that calling. And this book is about them coming back to one of the starships, coming back to Earth, and the work that they do to restore the planet after 300 years of climate change. So I've finished the first draft of that book, and I'm about to go through the editing process.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, we look forward to that. Now, this book, The Twins of Demeter, if you could say there's an overall message that you want to get across with this book, what would that be?
Well, my overall message is about community, about paying attention to our relationship to each other, that we should look for those things that bind us together, of course. But the whole area of climate change is an area of work that, if we allow to be ignored, will be not to our credit. We are not paying attention to God's call for us to steward His gift. The other part is just to have fun with a science fiction book, which I think there's enough twists and turns in it to intrigue people who read science fiction.
Well, this is a book I'm really excited about. Of course, like I said earlier, I love science fiction, and when you can add a faith element to that, and of course, something that really pertains to us today in the fact of climate change and being good stewards of the world God gave us. The book is called The Twins of Demeter, Science Fiction with a Faith Perspective by author Joseph Konchelik from Christian Faith Publishing. Get your copy today, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, the brick-and-mortar stores. Those are just a few of the locations. And Joseph, thank you for being on the show.
I appreciate you asking me. Thank you.
We all go through trials and tribulations of one form or another. And, sometimes they can be hard and life kind of weighs on you, but there's always hope. And I think that's at the heart of this next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable. The book is called Bitterness to Love by author Cynthia J. Carbaugh from Christian Faith Publishing. Cynthia, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now tell everybody a little about your story.
Well, I felt called by the Lord to write my story because of all the pain that I had gone through and the bitterness and the anger, the addictions, and then my life changed. It totally turned around, and I had a personal relationship with Jesus, and I felt called to share my story to help others, to let them know there's hope. We don't have to stay in bondage.
Now, how was it for you writing this? Because I have to imagine, all the things you had gone through to be able to talk about this, to write about this, all the personal things. Was it tough to do that, or was it kind of therapeutic to be able to write this all out?
Well, it was both. When you write it all out and then you look at it, it certainly puts it in perspective. But it was very therapeutic as well. I felt even more healing through writing, and just so amazing to me that I just was able to do it. I just never, ever imagined writing anything, and I never had until this, and I just felt called to help other people. I know what it's like to be in the bondage, and I want people to be free, and that was my only hope, that maybe even one person would get freedom and healing from the story.
As a first-time author, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to be able to tell your story and get this book published?
It was really, I had a great experience. Everybody there with Christian Faith that I was in touch with had been such a help to me and very helpful. I would tell anybody to go through Christian Faith because I cannot say one negative thing. They were very much there for me throughout the whole time.
Now, this book, Bitterness to Love, when people read this, what do you hope is the most important message they get from reading your story and your experience?
That for me, I want people to realize that there's love. We need love, and that's what the whole key of this is. We need the love of Jesus in us. And for me, I just hope and pray that people realize that forgiveness is freedom. And that's my biggest thing I want people to see. When you let go of that bitterness and forgiving, forgiveness, that you just get such an overwhelming freedom from it.
Well, that's an important message, an amazing message that we all need to hear, because, like I said, people go through different trials and tribulations. They may come in different forms, but they're all very similar in the fact that we do need that hope and that love of the Lord to get us that freedom that we so much desire and so much need. The book is called Bitterness to Love. I encourage everyone, pick up your copy today. You will be blessed, of course, by author Cynthia J. Carbaugh from Christian Faith Publishing. Get your copy, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, as well as at the brick and mortar stores. And Cynthia, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Our next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable, I think a fascinating book, a gripping account of one soldier's experience. The book is called Kunze Up Front, A Private's Perceptions from the Bottom Up, the Infantry in World War II, by author Otto R. Kunze from Christian Faith Publishing. Otto, thank you for being on the show.
Well, I'm delighted.
Tell everybody a little bit about your book.
The title, Kunze Up Front, has military implications. It is not a statement of fact, but rather it is a command that was passed down the line to inform me that my services are needed up front. The lieutenant and the first sergeant, they had found somebody that they wanted to talk to. The individual talked German, and the lieutenant and the sergeant couldn't talk German. They could only talk English, and the result was that the lieutenant would look down the line and say, okay, Kunze up front. So that's where the title comes from.
Now, what inspired you to write this book and tell your story?
I needed to write it just all the time, but I really never got around to writing it until I retired. I retired in 1990. Then the university put out a notice. They were going to publish something entitled Aggies at War, A&M graduates. Well, I was not an Aggie before the war. I graduated out of high school and was 18 years of age and was ready for military service. So the paperwork that I filled out as I went into the Army indicated that I could talk German. I didn't think I was going to go to Germany. I thought I was going to go to the Pacific, but was surprised when they sent me to the Atlantic. I was inducted and sent into the Signal Corps, and then a bulge had begun. We had lost a lot of infantrymen to where we suddenly needed infantrymen instead of Signal Corps men, and they didn't ask us any questions. They loaded us on a train, sent us to Camp Maxey, Texas, gave us 6 weeks of infantry training, and we were trained. Next thing I knew, I was on the USS America, which the name had been changed to the USS West Point, simply for security reasons, and I was on my way across the Atlantic to Europe.
Now, did Christian Faith Publishing make the publishing process easy for you?
Well, yes, they worked very well with me. I am still the author, and in other words, I have retained possession of the title, and it's still my book. They don't claim it.
Now, when people read this book, what do you hope is the most important message or the most important thing they learn from reading about your accounts?
The most important thing, well, I don't know that my service is much different from anybody else's. What difference is there? I could talk German, and nobody else in the battalion could talk German. Anything that came up within the battalion, if they needed an individual that could talk German, why, they would come and look me up. And command came down, Kunze up front.
Well, I tell you what, this is a fascinating book called Kunze Upfront, Private's Perceptions from the Bottom to the Top, Infantry in World War II by author Otto R. Kunze from Christian Faith Publishing. Pick up your copy today, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, as well as at the brick and mortar stores. And Otto, thank you for being on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Friday Night Author Roundtable. We'll be back next week with another great group of talented authors to discuss their books, their process, and their accomplishments. Have a great weekend, everyone.